Okay.
So I'll start with introductions and then.
Now we all know each other.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
Yeah, that was,
dress rehearsal.
Right.
Time is
I saw her here and I'm like, oh, we gotta go.
Okay.
So I'll start with introductions.
Shara's like, get it.
Okay.
together.
There it is.
Oh,
We're,
I need to.
Yeah, that was a
There we go.
Okay. Are we live?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, we are live. Hi, Tara.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. I think we'll start with introductions and then we'll call the meeting to order. So I am Gary Bennett. I'm the CFO of the district.
I'm Abby Hawkins, school board.
Derek Thomas, community member.
Matt Kaufman, community member.
Aaron Downs, superintendent.
Riley Carroll, assistant superintendent.
And my name is Tara Camp, and I'm the auditor for Sherwood School District.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. I appreciate the flexibility on the time and starting early. It was board meeting kind of kept growing in nature, and I hope this time works for everybody. It works great for us. We really appreciate you being here and giving your time. Also appreciate, I know both of our community members kind of dug into the audit. They both asked me questions, and I just really appreciate your time in this meeting, but also outside of this to engage with this and the budget committee and our board member for being here as well. We really appreciate it. We know it's one extra thing in your lives. So I'm going to turn it over to our chair to call the meeting to order, and we'll get started.
All right, I will officially convene the fiscal accountability meeting to review the 2024 audit.
Excellent. So just I'll do a quick overview of the purpose of this committee, just to remind people. I gave everybody a handout just with this information on it, but it's to provide an extra layer of financial oversight. In the past, we had the audit presented to the board in a general public session. It was generally very brief and not a lot of engagement. Not inappropriate, but it was just not appropriate for a large board meeting to do that. And so we decided to follow a model that some of the districts around us do, which was to add an extra layer of scrutiny and accountability to the audit and to go a little bit more in depth. And then to have this committee report back to the board of directors what they found after taking a little bit deeper dive. Another thing we've talked about with this committee doing would be to prepare a report to the community about how the levy is being spent and the overall financial health of the district, and have that come from this committee, and particularly have the citizen members and the board members sign off on it and not the staff. I think it's important that I don't have final edit rights. I'm willing to do whatever I need to do to contribute to the report, but I want the content. I think it's important, or we want the content to come from the committee to the community, saying this is what we found by looking at the district's financial position. That seemed kind of reasonable to everybody about what you expected we'd be talking about tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So I'll turn it back to you to lead the review of the audit of the governing body letter. Or not to lead it, but we'll go through it.
Yeah,
Turning it back to you.
perfect. Tara, thank you so much for the audit and the very helpful, audit letter. I guess this is the.
Last year we started with the governing body.
Do we
letter.
start with the governing body letter? I think that was.
So,
No, that's it.
excuse me, I probably should have turned it over to Tara.
Oh,
Last year,
Tara, there we go.
Yeah, I'm a
Perfect.
little bit confused today. I'm
No, that's okay.
We have an inexperienced chair.
No,
Yeah, like, we're just figuring this process out as we go. Once we get into the meat, we'll be rolling. We look frozen. Okay, we're back. Okay, so Tara, do you want to lead us through the governing body letter and the audit? I believe that's what we did last year.
yes, absolutely. So as part of the audit, we issue the governing body letter, and that is a letter that summarizes everything we're required to communicate with you. On page 1, we cover the purpose of the audit. Does everyone have their letter?
It's the last 2 pages of the packet they have. Maybe the last 2 pages.
So on page 1, we cover the purpose of the audit, and the purpose for the district is threefold. We perform the financial statement audit, and that is where we are testing the financials created by management in order to determine if they're fairly stated. Secondly, we perform the Oregon Municipal Audit Law Minimum Standards Procedures, and that's a compliance audit to look at various laws and regulations to see if the district is in compliance with that. And then lastly, we perform the federal single audit, and that is where we look at grants that rotate on a yearly basis. And we do a really deep dive into the federal grants and all the compliance requirements to see if all those compliance items are met. And then if you move to page 2 of the letter, we cover the results of the audit. So for the financial statement opinion, we issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, and that is a clean opinion with no reservations. That's an excellent result and exactly what the district is going for. For state minimum standards, we found no exceptions or issues requiring comment except as noted on page 43 of the report. For federal awards, we found no issues of non-compliance and no question costs. That's a very good result for the federal single audit. And then lastly, we did issue a management letter and we noted 2 material weaknesses and 1 significant deficiency. And those are all detailed in the schedule of findings and question costs in the report. On page 3 of the governing body letter, we also note that we encountered no difficulties in performing and completing our audit. The district's business office really did a fantastic job preparing for the audit and having everything ready for us. So it went very nice and efficient. And then we had no accounting disagreements or auditing disagreements as well with management.
And Tara, question for you.
Yes.
As far as performing the audit this year compared to a prior year, did you notice more efficiencies in the audit process itself?
Yeah, definitely in the audit process for sure. Absolutely.
All preparation and excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback off of that, does it seem as though the business office is properly staffed? Are there any concerns about staffing levels or staff training or anything like that?
The only thing that we talked about last year in this meeting, and I've discussed before with Gary, is the one thing we have noted and pointed out is that there is a lack of educated accountants, like people with accounting degrees. So that's definitely an area the district is aware of and that we've pointed out. As far as staffing levels, we definitely do not analyze like workload of the employees. So that's not something I can answer, but that's the one thing we have noted before.
Yeah, that's excellent feedback.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly, in the letter, we cover a couple new standards coming out that are applicable to the financial statements in the future. So those are good to be aware of because they work from business office staff as well as different reporting requirements. So as the next audit progresses, we'll definitely work with management to make sure that those items are implemented. So that's a very like overview of items that I wanted to communicate with you, but I can go into more detail or take specific questions as you would like.
So I guess, Tara, maybe just a little bit of context, and obviously you mentioned on page 43 the detail of the material weakness, but just looking back at prior years, we know that we discussed there was a weakness last year as well. Looking at the schedule of findings, it looks like those were resolved. So these are new weaknesses identified. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The 2 material weaknesses and significant deficiency were the result of accounting errors that we came across in the 23-24 fiscal audit. They were corrected by management when we brought them to their attention. And they were new in this audit period and had not been present before.
Oh, perfect. No, I just wanted to pick up on that. So to turn the page on last year's audit and what we discussed when we met last year. So last year there was a material weakness regarding the district recording a material amount of funds as grant revenue rather than local revenue. So just For anybody who's watching at home, it wasn't that any money was misdirected or misused. It was just in the wrong column in the financial report, which is, important. But when we talked about it last time, we talked about it in terms of, this was a transaction that we don't do very often. We learned about how to properly account for the transaction and agreed that it was only going to be concerning that were to recur in future years. And so we're happy to see that that did not recur. And we did not have a similar finding this year that last year. And that probably leads well into some of the control findings for this year. The first material weakness was around insurance claims proceeds recorded as deferred revenue and quoted as local revenue rather than insurance proceeds. So a similar categorization error on a different type of transaction. So was that the Middleton insurance?
Yeah, that was related to the
proceeds?
Middleton piece, and there was actually two issues with this. One was we recorded as local revenue, not it's actually under sale or loss of fixed assets. It's where it doesn't mention anything about insurance, but that's actually where it's recorded. And we missed that one. So that was one of the thing, and that's actually, I believe, what made it material. Tara can weigh in on that. It was the size of that amount of money. It was $500,000.
Yeah.
And then the other issue was we received $500,000 from our insurance company, but only had $340-something thousand in expenses last year. So we deferred the revenue to next year because that's when the expenditures were going to occur. And we have since incurred those expenditures. And we should not have deferred that revenue. We should have recognized the revenue in last year and then just pay the expenses out of this year. And I think the caveat, if I remember right, was unless there's an expressly written agreement that we have to pay the money back, which didn't exist, it was implicit, but there was no agreement. So that was just a learning for us. All of that was a learning for me, honestly.
But that was also just kind of a category. So there was never, just to confirm, Tara, there was never any risk of district funds being misspent or misappropriated. That was just a reporting.
And so I think just to kind of summarize, I mean, obviously things will get kind of misclassified in accounts, from time to time. What makes this material is just the size of the balance. It's not that anything was not present or, to Matt's point, missing. It's just the fact that a mistake was made in classification of an amount that happened to be material, made it a material weakness, correct?
Yes, because if there are accounting errors that are not resolved, that are material, we would not be able to issue a clean opinion. Because the entire purpose of the financial state opinion is saying you followed the GAAP accounting rules. So if these items that we noted were not fixed, the district wouldn't have received a clean opinion, if that makes sense.
These were actual weaknesses that were identified and fixed during the period of the audit, actually.
Correct. Yes.
Minus process carryovers. Okay, that's good.
Yes.
And then the other material weakness, similar type of issue where the sale of capital asset was recorded as local revenue rather than the sale of an asset. So that was a similar, am I correct in saying that that's kind of a similar type of, it's not that the funds were misspent or there was anything suspicious about the operational aspects of what happened. It's just a matter of how
just an accounting error. Yeah.
Presented in the report.
And just so people know what that is, and this goes to one of the questions that you asked, Eric. That was the sale of a piece of property we bought that we thought might be the next Bowman house. And it turned out to have some restrictions and things that made it not really work for that house, for that purpose. And so we sold that asset and then recorded it incorrectly, which wasn't great, but The other thing was that closed out our construction in progress. When you asked what that was
Yeah,
about,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's where
okay.
that's where that came from, on that reconciliation, so. We have no other construction in progress and we disposed of that asset or sold that asset.
Mhm.
Very good.
So then that brings us to the significant deficiency, which was subscriptions obtained in the current year were not originally recorded as a capital outlay or other financing sources. So is that just so is that the SPIDA standard?
Yes, GASB 96, the SPIDA standard, and this was the second year of implementation. There's a lot of accounting rules around that. And again, it's an accounting rule that wasn't followed just like the other two. So that's what led to that finding.
So this was a new, just to clarify for people, this is a new standard that rolled out, much to the trend of
Yes.
every business, you know, governmental or for profit or, you know, anyone else.
It's newer. This was the second year of implementation.
Second year, and then Gary, would you give us a little?
Yeah, so I think what happened to us was we actually had another accountant on staff in the first year that we had this, and she handled all of the SPIDA process for us and all the accounting for that. And when we went back and did it ourselves, we just missed making the right journal entry to categorize those as capital proceeds, and that was a miss on our part. We got it down, now we know what to do. And we won't make the same mistake twice, but that's what happened.
Yep.
That's from the inside coming out, and just to address the issue of not enough accountants on staff. We are in the process of hiring a controller, as we have one person in our office who's retiring, and all of the accountants, all of the people in the running, we don't have a decision made yet, or not, just in the process of looking, but all the candidates have strong accounting backgrounds, many years of experience, degrees in accounting, things of that nature, and we're prioritizing those technical skills in our hire, just so we continue to add to our team.
Just from a little bit of extra background for the community, one, you know, SPIDAs is a really, it seems to be a pretty common error looking around at similar districts and similar municipalities. And then there's actually just an AICP report about how hard it is to recruit governmental accountants with the accounting qualifications that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just a Sherwood problem,
No.
It's a larger problem.
Yes.
You know, districts and cities and counties,
Mhm.
yeah, we're just doing our best. And hopefully that recruitment will go well and we can identify the issue or remediate the issue.
We're working hard on it.
Yeah. So before we run down the questions, there was one, I'm trying to remember where. Oh, so on the independent auditors report related to Oregon state regulations, I think this is page 43 in the report. There's a mention of the district making an emergency purchase without approval from the board. And I thought we could discuss that really quickly.
I think it's important that we go through that. Do you want to talk about it from your perspective, and then I'll share the kind of the context?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the many laws and regulations we look at relates to procurement. And what we do in our testing is we pull a sample of items that might be subject to procurement laws. And when we look at the detail of those, we'll ask questions and we'll seek back up, like, where's the evidence that you got quotes? Where's the evidence that you got bids for these? In this particular case, this was a transaction that was definitely an emergency. We agreed with that. But what was missing was like the actual documentation of the emergency declaration approved by the board, which is the ORSs. So that's specifically the part that was missing.
So just to be clear, everybody agrees it was an emergency driving the purchase, but there's an Oregon state statute that says when that happens, there needs to be an emergency approval by the board.
And I was unaware of that, and I didn't take it to the board.
Yeah.
Would it be
And
helpful
it can
by,
even be done after the fact.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you can't wait for a board meeting. Something breaks and you need it now. That's totally fine. But yeah, in the future, we'd like to see that just declared in the board.
Well, and even before you get in the context, I would suspect that if there's an emergency, I mean, I know the board meets on a regular basis, but the board's kind of always like the call the district to agree, right? So wouldn't it be a matter of just informing a board member, even absent a scheduled meeting of the context? Is that, am I understanding it right?
that might be something we would do, but that would not constitute board approval. It has to be in a,
Oh.
it has to be in a formal meeting and it has to be approved by a vote of the board in an actual meeting.
Okay.
But
We do have the ability to work with our board leadership to pull
Right.
together emergency board meeting. And often now with Zoom and other electronic ways to do it, it's actually helpful. We could say, we need to get together tomorrow morning at 8, who
Yeah.
can make it? And if you have questions, let us know. And so I think we would do that moving forward. So we don't have to wait till the next board meeting. And if it is an emergency, I know our board would be very, very receptive to being available to.
And I think we can have it approved. If I'm not correct, we can have it approved after the fact, correct? I mean,
Yeah.
for leaks and starts causing problems, we fix it and take it to the board at the end of the month saying, hey, we declared this emergency just in a full transparency. This is what we did.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
that's
okay.
correct.
And then Tara, just to make sure, so what you'd be looking for as far as documentation, that's just like a minuted approval within a
Yes.
day, 7 minutes.
Yeah, we'd look for the minutes.
Yeah, no, you live. We had multiple,
Yeah.
I thought this was a different emergency. when
Yeah, I mean,
when
and I don't know
thought
if it
was-
matters to share the context, but it might be helpful.
I think.
Yeah.
I think the context is helpful. So it has to do with the high school. And when we built the new high school, we put in a system that when the lockdown button was pushed, the doors on the classrooms automatically locked. And we were struggling with this system and eventually got to the part where the manufacturer was no longer going to support it. And it was getting late into the school year and there's a lot of doors at that high school. And so we were under a time crunch to get every single lock replaced with a lock and key that we know will work every single time in short order. And the other thing about this is I do not believe we lost a penny on this because the company that installed the original system knew that they sold us a faulty system. And Jim pushed really hard to give us a good deal on the locks. Now, I can't confirm that because we didn't get 3 bids, but he was confident that we got a deal that we'd get no place else. So we should have followed our process differently, no question about it. It's learning for us. But we prioritize student safety. And I think we got a good price. And the mistake we made was not circling back forward and explaining this, having them vote on it. So that's kind of how that went down sort of late last spring.
Mhm.
Is there?
Were there, so that's the end of my questions. Were there any other questions or questions from others? Or I think you mentioned, Gary, there might have been, was it only this?
That was a question that I was asked by a board member when the packet went live. Anybody else have any other questions for Tara before we let her go?
No, very
We
good.
do not.
Are there any other, I guess Kara will just ask the kind of generic closing question. Are there any issues that we didn't ask about or areas of concern that should be on our agenda for the next year?
No, not that I can think of. I think these meetings are very good and thorough and detailed, and you have very good, smart questions. I do want to say that we really enjoy working with the Sherwood School District. Gary's a really great leader and incredibly smart and always open to learning, everything regarding finances and all that. So we really appreciate all their hard work. It's a ton of work to get ready for an audit and be prepared for it and get it all issued. So really good job to you guys for that.
Thank you.
Karen.
We appreciate working with you too. It's been a pleasure.
So good audit.
No, we really appreciate it and we appreciate your time and like we mentioned to start, our goal here was just to give people in the community, should they ever want to tune in and watch this video at a later date, just confidence that we are looking through the audit, we're looking through the financial report, we're asking questions when things don't quite add up. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the answers we got here leave me really confident with where we ended 2024 and things to work on for 2025, but you know, you're always trying to get better.
Right, that's true.
That's great.
That is the truth. All right, Tara, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tara.
Yeah,
Have a great
thank
evening.
you.
Seeing you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly.
Just two things we had on the agenda that I think it'd be just worth discussing, and we can just talk about them sort of informally, just sort of planning out the presentation to the board, what that might look like. And that'll obviously be at the end of February, not obviously, but that will probably be at the end of February. I think it's February 24th. Will be our next meeting of the board, and so what that might look like. And also, I had some thoughts about planning for how we might go about preparing the report for the community. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on either of those two things.
Abby, would you mind sharing from the board lens, what would be helpful for the committee for that preparation for that presentation? You've got that, you can have,
Yeah,
you've
I
been
mean,
in this and.
I think just kind of repeating why you asked the questions you asked in here and going clearly through the explanation, because honestly, I mean, I don't work in finances and I sit and listen to you and I'm thinking, I don't know what else I would follow up with that. I mean, your questions are really, they're very thorough and very smart, and they always have been. And so, and you're very easy to understand, like why you would ask, and your answers are also very easy to understand. And so if I'm sitting here understanding I am used to looking at these financial reports, but for the average person, if they're sitting here listening, I think it tracks and makes perfect sense. I think that's what they want to hear, right? That we're really looking, that we really understand the material being given back to us. Yeah. I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah, no, we can just do a shorter version of this and then let people know if they want the longer version.
Okay.
It's or if they have trouble falling asleep.
I mean, this was fairly short, you
Yeah.
know, it's like, this is not, comparatively, this is not an overwhelming amount of information.
I think it'll be fairly brief. And so do you want to maybe collaborate on a presentation? Do we throw together, or how do you want to do this?
You did it last year.
Yeah,
Says
so
you need
And
to-
just use the same.
He's like, I already have it.
yeah, I think we can just update it from, and honestly, I might even and we can run over a few aspects pretty briefly. Part of the reason why I don't think we'll have to go into as much detail is just the fact that the information you've been providing, Gary, like does a really good job of walking people through the important parts around fund balance, around the budget, actual reconciliation. So we can throw those up and let people know that those are in there, that the auditor took a look at them and didn't have any problems. But then
I think maybe the one additional component I would add is, you know, since last year was the first year kind of you put this accountability committee together, right? There were some commitments and transparency and efficiency that were made and continue to kind of keep the community updated. Like I would come back and say, also, you know, where are we at with those and how we're tracking? And I think the whole process of, you know, given that this is the second year that you're continuing to follow is a good thing just to say, this is what we've been doing. In addition to what's actually in the report, we're just coming back to those commitments that were made last year to say, yeah, we're still doing what we said we do.
Yeah. And that is, so when you go through the actual financial performance for the year, I think we touched on this, but we should go over it again, like just the fact that the district we under promised, you know, in 2020.
Yeah, that 8 million additional revenue is really nice.
Yeah, that was mostly levy funds, but
Yeah.
also state school funds and grant funds, and investment earnings was actually a huge piece of that, where we were earning 5% on our money last year, sitting in an LGIP account.
That's fantastic.
But even on the
That adds
expense,
up a lot when you,
but even on the expense side, like we came in under.
Yeah, we did. We came in
what
under.
forecasted. So it's worth letting people know that just because we have money, we're not going to spend it. We're rebuilding
Yeah, and
rebuilding the reserves.
I think that's the piece you gotta hit on, right? Because otherwise people are like, oh, well, are we paying too much now? Let's dial that back, right? I think the pieces is that's building up a reserves consistent with what you've been sharing in the board meetings. The accountability committee is now seeing that actually get to execution.
And that's probably something, probably not for this. We'll just keep it to the report for this meeting, but as we start the next budget cycle, like providing people with some context about what's happening elsewhere and not happening in Sherwood will be useful, and giving people some context around. Like I know when we met, when the audit opinion was just coming out, like giving people some context around Sherwood per student funding, like how we stack up statewide in terms of what we get from Salem from a non-levy perspective and with the levy added.
Yeah, that'd be important to include in the budget.
I think too, it was always part of our messaging with the levy that we talked about right sizing things, even with the addition of funds if it passed. I just think that wasn't like the shiny fun thing to talk about, but we always touched back on it. And so now that we've received the levy, sometimes that can be like the rub point with people that they're like, oh, I forgot that extra piece about like, being careful and not overspending. And that's true. Like that is what we promised to do with the money. And so that's what we are going to continue to do. I know we've had noise about wanting a lot of extra teachers and things like that. And I mean, I know there's nobody who would rather hire more teachers than the people sitting here. But it is the right thing. So be careful about how we're spending money. Because levy funds are not always going to be there and be guaranteed.
And one thing that kills you in schools is the ping pong where you're
Totally.
kind of up and down and bouncing around. You've got to try to really smooth that curve out. That's my opinion anyway, just from being a teacher and a principal and administrator for a long time. Bring somebody in, you train them up, and then you lay them off. And then that's a bad pattern. We want to stay in the smooth pattern.
Right.
And I just from like when we do look for, and I think this is an important point to make, I think one thing that the district has always done a really good job of is being forward looking in terms of not only what resources do we have today, but what resources are we going to have 5 years from now. And we're seeing districts who did not take that approach have to make some really hard decisions because of just funds that were scheduled to phase out and are now phasing out.
Right.
Whereas we're in a relatively better position because of good management as well as community support to make sure that we're able to do things.
For sure.
Just want to add a thanks to Gary and the team, like to Tara's point, I don't want to just gloss over that. It's a significant endeavor and one that he takes seriously. It's I know you know that, but I just want to say thank you to you and your team. Not just to put together the audit, that is a thing, but we also to get the results and the clarity around things that we will get better at, and you're spot on, we always will be getting better, but in talking to colleagues around us and friends of mine that are in other districts and what some things that they're working through, you're right, Abby, there's a rhyme and reason for us, the right size and the right approach for us as we do look forward is really important. Tonight, Gary will share a few things to your point, as we lead into the budget message for this school year, this upcoming school year too. So I'm excited and I'm thrilled that we have this and that we have you as volunteers and as support for additional eyes, because it's really important to us to be good communicators. And we take the financial stewardship very seriously. And I'm incredibly thankful for the hard work to get us the levy. I understand that, but also to do the right way for the next several years. And I know we all want that in this room. So she does not, also any accountant, Polly Rogers, and anyone, I've worked with several different firms over the last several years with different places. They don't just say things.
Right.
Especially some accounts, they just don't say much, right? They will politely not say something. So to come out and she was very complimentary during the time and very complimentary of the hard work of you and your team. So thank you for that.
Well, and you beat me to it because I wanted to thank my team for their hard work in terms of they're super organized. I mean, the preparation for the 24-25 audit is going on right now. just with the organization of how they take care of stuff and on top of stuff and just we've had some things come in and like, this is like the one we had last year, we had a finding on, we need to make sure we collaborate around getting it right. And they just do a really, really good job and they work really hard. And I think it's worth noting that we will be at full staff next week for the first time since August. We've had at least one person out that whole time, and half the time we've had people that have been sick. We just haven't had a staff in 6 months. And they've still just kept things rolling along and got through an audit.
That's
It's,
amazing.
and we're already on the small side for physical teams.
Yeah.
So they're really, they're getting after it.
That was the point I was gonna raise, like you run a pretty lean.
Super lean.
Finance shop, and especially like I know we talked about some of the issues that came up with the audit, and I think given like because of how lean we run, there's gonna be a couple of report, things in a 60-page document that nobody in the community, five people in the community are gonna read, are gonna end up in the wrong column sometimes, and I don't think that's something to worry about.
I know, Gary, we talked last year about this, the accounting knowledge team has, and that's hard, and I don't think necessarily you have to be an accountant I mean, you have to have someone ultimately kind of look at all of it, but that aside, we talked about kind of getting a kind of a knowledge base put in place. One of the things I think we tossed around, is there a reference portal tool or something for those that can kind of go to, whether it's a firm itself or something online? And I don't know if that's still an option, or because you'll never have enough accounting knowledge for obviously the way the regulations change on a regular basis. So how do you close that? Is there something, and now the build-up of some of the funds gives us an opportunity to purchase a knowledge system that allows us to look right at the interpretation or interpretive guidance?
So there absolutely is. And so there's a couple ways to look at that. So on the global sense, there's OASBO, which is the Oregon Association of School Business Officials, and they hold conferences multiple times throughout the year and provide lots of guidance on this stuff. And so we take advantage of that professional development opportunity. And it will be an expectation of the new person coming in that they do as well. There's also Government Finance Officers Association has a lot of stuff, a lot of online courses and things you can take, and they're super niche and specific. So if you have somebody who comes in and they're responsible for X, there's training on X. And so we need to continue to look into that stuff and especially on the higher level, like Stephanie has a degree in accounting and lots of experience in accounting. Another staff member is working on a degree, and then we have two that have just been trained up from, starting without accounting backgrounds. And so to bring all of their knowledge up, really the models look like building up the knowledge of Stephanie, who has an accounting degree, and she does the training for the people who work in the office more directly than. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but I guess, even if you have trained individuals with accounting knowledge, given how the regs change on such a regular basis, it's kind of that interpretive guidance too on, you can almost go to, I think of like a Big Four portal that, on what is the guidance now on how you apply revenue from the sale of a fixed asset or something like that, right? That might have changed during the course of the year. That the training, we got trained in August, but the standard changed in February. So how that's now being interpreted might be in the current kind of scripture versus what you kind of heard at a conference. How do we close that gap type of thing?
Well, I think for me, OASBO typically does a good job of saying we have these two new Gatsby's coming up. We've already had some trainings on them for, hey, this is coming up. Here's what you need to watch for. Look for more in February and then more again in July when you're putting your audits together. And so the professionals in that organization, they pay attention to that stuff and they bring us all along. And I think the Government Finance Officers Association stuff is better for maybe building background knowledge in governmental fund accounting.
Okay.
And maybe Gatsby's that have rolled out in past days that we have to pay attention to, or other things.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, with my other hat on, I look at some, like the governmental resources from the firms are
They are, I don't, yeah, I don't know that phrase.
The GFOA, like I've always found the best updates are either GFOA updates or direct Gatsby updates. But yeah, normally that's the way you would do it.
Right,
It's like there are like PwC.
Right,
or
right.
walking
I mean,
through,
on
like,
a-
all the new-
On a non-government.
all the new
side, that's all
standards
kind of
that,
a lot.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think it's just so, it's a combination of it's a smaller pond and the dollars. It's not as lucrative.
But also
So
fund
you don't
accounting is
get
kind
as
of
much
complex. as well.
attention.
It really is.
Super complex.
It's, and so that, it's that piece that's always hard to, you can find accountants, but then those that are really knowledgeable about fund accounting and government accounting is even a smaller niche.
And so, for sure, and that's a lot of the reason we went out for our controller hire in January when Stephanie's retiring in June, because if we hire a private sector accountant, we want at least 6 months of cross training and overlap and time to send that person to these trainings. And I mean, it's like our applicants all have 25 years of experience, but some of them are 25 in the private sector.
Right.
And there's definitely a transition to be had there. So we're weighing through that. I do want to leave a minute to talk briefly about the report to the community. I had some thoughts about how to prepare that, and maybe we form a subcommittee, so we don't have to pull the whole committee together, and people would like to join forces. We could either collaborate virtually on it, we could set some meetings in Zoom, we could meet in person. I'm up for whatever. I just don't think the whole committee needs to get together to do that. I think then we could present what we find back to the committee either electronically for their approval before it goes out, or we could come back together and discuss it, whatever folks think make work. So what do you think about that?
That's great.
That makes sense.
And then maybe if there's some way to do some sort of a community I don't know if there is a way to do a solicitation of just like questions people have, or is that?
Put on the district website.
We could put it on the district website and have a little blurb for in the school newsletters, which said, hey, if you have questions about budget, click here, and it sends them to a. You
I
can
think
give
the
them
tough thing is, it's just like everything else that like, the district only has certain places where they can solicit feedback. And most of the time, we get questions from people who are like, I have no idea how to give my feedback, and, you know, we're like, it's in your last 4 newsletters, and so it seems to not be touching people the right way, or they're not finding it. So, that's all that they can do. I totally get that, but then I think it takes people like yourself to share it, like, share it with people you know who might have interest,
I think that's.
you know, because
that's
it's really hard to reach.
It's true.
It's hard to get different people to give that feedback, and then you only ever see it randomly on like a Facebook page.
Right.
But it's like at that point, you're not giving very educated answers, and you don't have the ear of somebody who can answer it correctly, you know, it's just, it's clunky.
No, I think that's a better.
But I
we
like
can
the
just
idea,
do-
I think it's great.
Maybe it would be better to just put the report together, present the report, and then we can say.
Yeah.
There are other questions that
Yeah.
people have, or anything, you know, if it's raised any questions.
Yeah.
Like
Happy
we
to
can-
provide a
yeah, happy to,
Follow-up report.
we'll talk about it as long as you're willing to stay in this.
And I think on some level, you know, the group of people who are experienced with financial analysis and accounting could really put a summary together that might answer some questions people don't know they have.
Right.
That position may not be something they're talking about at the dinner table.
Yeah.
But if it's put in context, it might be of interest to them to know ours has been, you know, increasing and improving pretty rapidly.
No, just there's a lot of numbers. floating
Yeah.
around. So just putting it into context, like most. The thing to remember about these financial reports is they don't tell you how well you're doing as a school district. They just say, here's the money coming in, here's the money going out, and everything's been attended to. But hopefully we can step back and incorporate some of those other, the things that people actually care.
Right, right,
So-
it's an autopsy.
Yeah, so I would just say, let me know if you're interested in working on that, and we'll then get together, maybe just via email and figure out how we want to approach that, and I'm up for whatever works for whoever wants to participate.
Awesome.
We'll put something together, run it by the committee. Great.
Awesome. No, thank you, and thank you. Be sure to pass along great thanks to your team.
I'll do that tomorrow morning.
Excellent.
All right, thank you, appreciate your time.
Thank you. Oh, I formally adjourn the